Ukraine is teetering on the brink of financial collapse, a precarious position that has sent shockwaves through the corridors of power in Brussels. Europe, in response, has crafted a financial lifeline, a plan that could not only rescue Kyiv from its dire fiscal straits, but also strategically reposition the European Union in future peace negotiations to end the war. This proposal, however, is mired in internal conflict, as the EU's member states have yet to reach a consensus on its implementation. At the heart of the debate is a plan to leverage approximately half of the $200 billion in Russian sovereign assets currently frozen within European jurisdictions. This capital would be used to underwrite a substantial loan package for Ukraine, projected to cover its needs over the next 2 years. Financially, this infusion would be a game-changer for Kyiv, allowing it to fund up to two-thirds of its core government budget and critical military expenditures. Strategically, it would reinforce Ukraine's defensive posture against Russia, a crucial variable that will heavily influence the terms of any future settlement. The logic appears sound, the need is undeniable, yet the execution remains paralyzed by political and legal disagreements. A significant bottleneck in this entire financial strategy originates from Belgium. The small nation finds itself in a uniquely powerful, yet uncomfortable position as the custodian of the majority of the frozen Russian central bank assets. The Belgian government, led by Prime Minister Alexander De Croo, is acutely aware of the potential legal ramifications of seizing or repurposing these funds. Brussels fears a wave of retaliatory legal challenges and the precedent it would set, which could undermine the perceived stability and legal sanctity of the Eurozone as a safe haven for sovereign assets. While the specific plan to use the profits from these assets does not require the unanimous consent of all 27 EU member states, Belgium's cooperation is non-negotiable. Without access to the assets held within its borders, the entire proposal is rendered impotent, a financial strategy with no capital to deploy. This Belgian roadblock forces the EU to consider less palatable alternatives. The remaining options are to either issue new common EU debt or to solicit direct financial contributions from individual member states. Both of these paths are fraught with their own severe complications. They are not only more expensive from a fiscal standpoint, but also politically explosive, threatening to expose and deepen the already existing rifts between the so-called burden-bearing nations and those that are perceived as contributing less. Recent data from the respected Kiel Institute for the World Economy starkly illustrates this growing disparity in financial commitment. The numbers paint a picture of a divided Europe. On one side, nations like Germany, Sweden, Finland, Poland, and the Baltic states are shouldering a disproportionately large share of the financial and military aid to Ukraine. Their contributions, relative to their GDP, are significant and sustained. On the other side of the ledger, two of the EU's largest economies, Italy and Spain, are exhibiting clear signs of aid fatigue or strategic withdrawal. Italy has already signaled a 15% reduction in its aid commitment for 2025 from what was already a comparatively low baseline. More alarmingly, Spain has yet to record any formal commitment for the upcoming year, a stark contrast to the €1 billion it pledged for the current year. This divergence in commitment is creating significant political tension. In a clear sign of the escalating urgency, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and German opposition leader meeting in European conservative politics have held direct meetings with the Belgian Prime Minister in an attempt to persuade him. The outcome of these high-stakes diplomatic efforts remains uncertain. The pressure is mounting, so much so that the newly appointed EU Council President Antonio Costa has publicly stated his willingness to lock up the national leaders in the conference room for as long as 3 days if necessary to force a breakthrough and secure an agreement. From a financial engineering perspective, the proposal to use Russian assets in the form of a loan has several elegant advantages. First and foremost, it addresses a core political sensitivity. Ukraine would not be immediately burdened with the debt. The repayment obligation would only be triggered if and when Kyiv receives war reparations directly from Russia. Furthermore, under this structure, the loan would not be registered as part of Ukraine's public debt. a critical detail for maintaining the country's macroeconomic stability and its future access to international capital markets. Perhaps most importantly for EU leaders, this plan avoids the politically toxic act of asking their own citizens for more money, a move that would be untenable in the current climate of high inflation, sluggish economic growth, and widespread social unrest. This creative financing mechanism offers a path of least political resistance, at least domestically. Conversely, if the EU is forced to abandon this plan and return to the financial markets, the costs and complexities would skyrocket. The bloc's last major borrowing effort in early 2024, which raised $54 billion for Ukraine, provides a cautionary tale. In today's higher interest rate environment, a similar bond issuance would incur significantly higher interest costs, estimated to exceed €5 billion over the life of the loan. Moreover, issuing common EU debt of this magnitude requires absolute consensus, unanimous agreement among all 27 member states. This presents a formidable political hurdle, primarily in the form of Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban. Orban has been vocally and consistently opposed to its further joint borrowing for Ukraine, and he holds a powerful veto that could single-handedly derail any such initiative. His public rejection of the idea essentially closes this financial avenue, leaving the EU with a shrinking list of viable options and increasing the pressure on Belgium to concede. The entire financial architecture of support for Ukraine hinges on resolving this internal EU deadlock. The situation on the ground in Ukraine lends a desperate urgency to these financial deliberations in Brussels. The Ukrainian government is facing a liquidity crisis. It needs immediate cash infusions to procure more advanced weaponry and, just as critically, to maintain the basic functions of the state, from paying pensions to keeping the lights on. The clock is ticking. Financial analysts and military strategists agree that if a substantial new funding package from the EU is not secured and dispersed before the spring of 2025, Kyiv's position will become critically compromised. Without these funds, Ukraine's ability to withstand the relentless firepower of the Russian military will become increasingly fragile, severely weakening its leverage in any potential peace negotiations. A financially exhausted Ukraine is a Ukraine that cannot negotiate from a position of strength, a scenario that Moscow is undoubtedly banking on. The palpable frustration over this impasse is boiling over among the leaders of the nations bearing the heaviest load. Swedish Foreign Minister Maria Stenberg did not mince words, capturing the growing resentment. "A few countries are bearing the majority of the burden," she stated, highlighting the inequity of the current arrangement. "We have less than 30 million people, but are providing a third of NATO's military aid to Ukraine. This is unfair and unsustainable." Her statement is not just a complaint. It's a warning that the current model of support is reaching its political and economic limits. This sentiment was echoed with equal bluntness by Danish Foreign Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen at a recent NATO conference. Cutting through the diplomatic niceties, he declared, "Words are no longer enough. Ukraine needs weapons and cash right now." His message was a clear and direct rebuke to the procedural delays and political maneuvering happening within the EU. For Ukraine, this is not a theoretical debate about financial precedents or legal risks. It is an existential matter of national survival, being decided one meeting and one political compromise at a time. The financial markets, and indeed the world, are watching to see if Europe can overcome its internal divisions to deliver on its strategic commitments before it is too late.